Hey everyone. One thing you're going to hear me say over and over again when we talk about 3D printing is if you can buy it, buy it. All right. Reserve your 3D prints to things that you can't find anywhere or just can't get. And the reason I say that is 3D printing, right? If you're making something yourself, odds are, unless you've got the money to pay for a expensive tool to render your model, you're probably going to have to make mistakes, right? Little trial and error getting things done, especially if you're new to CAD work. But even if you're not, depending upon the tool that you're using, and they get quite expensive. So if you're going for one of the free tools, they're usable. All right. I use Tinkercad. It's usable. It's not the best CAD program out on the market, but it doesn't cost me anything, so it works. But when I do it, I will lay things out, and sometimes I get it right on the first try. A lot of times it's just off by a mil or two, then I need to go back and rework it a little bit. But I work on practical things for the most part. If you go to my Etsy store, you'll see that I've got some other that are practical, but they're like shades for nightlights and things like that. Here, what I want to talk about is some of the practical stuff that I use that you could, in theory, buy, but there's a caveat. And this first one is bird feeders. Now, I found a couple of bird feeder sets online. One is a bird/water combination. It's kind of egg-shaped, open on both sides, sealed at the bottom, obviously. And the other one that I got was a hopper type. Now you're going to say, but you just said go buy it if you can. True. But I have bears. And in 1 year, I must have gone through half a dozen bird feeders. Sometimes they would just get knocked down, which is fine. And the bear could figure out how to open it and eat the contents. Okay. Most of the times they got squashed. They were torn apart. They were stepped on and cracked open. And it got to the point where those are expensive, and if I can 3D print it, I'll 3D print it. So I 3D printed a series of these egg-shaped ones, and they work out pretty well. The downside to them is if it rains or it snows, it's going to get into it, right? It's no top over it. And then I found the hopper one. Now, a hopper model that I found, it was a 4-piece model. You got a base piece that actually has a couple holes in it if you want the drainage one. There is a shaft that goes through the entire model. There is the walls of the bin. Now, what I don't like about these is the fact that you can't see into it. All right, if you think of a lot of the hopper models out there, you can see through these type. And a hopper is basically a bin with openings at the bottom so that when the birds get on it, they shake the feeder and seed drops out into the tray. And then it has a roof. All right, so it's 4 pieces. You put the hopper onto the base, slide the shaft up through the top, and the shaft has a hole at the top of it so you can hang it. There were several problems that I had with this model. The first one was the fact that it was very decorative, all right? It looked like a little house, okay? But that block of roof at the top was solid. That's a lot of PLA being used. Wasn't thrilled with that. It adds to the print time, etc. Now, I didn't cut the shaft down, although I could have. I left the shaft the full length, but I cut the roof down. So it's got a minimal pitch. It's more to keep stuff from getting into the hopper than anything else. I mean, that's really what that roof is there for. The old one didn't come out far enough. It's not tall enough to actually do that, especially with the angle that the roof was at, to put anything over the tray to protect it. And I might change the roof a little bit to widen it out so it can do that. Currently it doesn't. But if I put another base underneath it, I can expand it out so it covers the bins a little bit. And that might work. It's still really narrow, really short. But the other problem that this had is it's just like all the other ones that you see with this hopper configuration, where it just has a tray at the bottom. And that means the birds are landing on the tray in order to eat. Those trays aren't very wide, especially in this one. But even I've noticed on the other hopper models, they usually don't make those trays very wide. But one of the old bird feeders that I had that the squirrels took apart, it was a wooden feeder. The hopper was these two clear plastic pieces, which I like because I can see into it, angled downward, so it's a V shape if you look at it from the side. And it had a roof over it, and the roof extended out over the bins a little bit. But the important part was on the side of the bins, and now these didn't have an all-around bin. The ones that I'm using are an all-around bin. This just had a little tray that opened out in the front and the back. But it had a perch. So I recreated that. I took a very easy to do in Tinkercad. You create a square, right? Solid square. Create a hole that you put into the square so that you get the size all the way around of what you want. I've kept it to about 5 mils. And then I put the tray. I took the model that I already had of the tray and put it on top of it so that now this rectangular form I have has now been moved into the tray itself. Right? Somehow I ended up wiping out these little pieces that were in there meant to position the bin. I just eyeballed it and glued it in place anyway, so that's what I was going to do in the other situation. And the ones that were in the model, not quite lining up the way I wanted them anyway. They were a little too tight. They didn't quite slide. The thing didn't slide over it the way it should. And I'll work on that. But the important thing is I now had these rails on the outside, these perches. And I've noticed that while I've got 3 of these feeders, only one of them has the perch, and it's getting cleaned out on a regular basis. The larger birds like it, which I thought they would, like blue jays and things like that. It's very difficult for a large bird to eat because the feeder isn't that big to begin with. And even having the perch, it's kind of hard for them to bend themselves into it. But I noticed the little birds really like it because they can grab onto that perch and just eat and not be on the bin itself, which again, like I said, is not very big, and try to balance there and eat. And they seem much happier with this new configuration. So I may just retool the other ones that I've got by gluing this frame onto the bottom of it. Or I could redo them. I've been gluing the center shaft in on some of them just because it makes it easier when you're working on it. So the shaft itself has a little square at the bottom that it locks into, but it doesn't click into place. It just sits there. And when you're taking it apart, especially doing it by yourself, right, you take that top off and the shaft can drop right through. Now, if the shaft drops through, the shaft is part of the hopper bin, comes right through the middle of it. So if the shaft drops through and you try to pour any seed in, the seed's going to go through. So you have to kind of hold it and hold your hand underneath it in such a way that you can hold that piece in place while you pour the seed in, or hold it from the shaft and put the seed in, but then you got to put it down on something, or you got to hold it when you put the roof on top because you could pop it back down. It's easier to just glue the thing in place. So if I were to go through and replace that, I would have to replace the base and the shaft. Another thing that I had that I couldn't find anything for, my 3D printer. One of them is Wi-Fi only. The other one has a nice variant. It is Wi-Fi or cabled. And I thought, well, I'd really like to cable this thing if I can. So I did, but now I've got this big long cable running down there. I have a drop ceiling. Now, if you're familiar with a drop ceiling, it's a metal frame into which, in this particular case, are seated. It's kind of like the bottom of it is an awful lot like the plastic wallpapers that they used to make, and fiberglass on top of it for for insulation. And I thought, well, I could go above it, but I've got other wires running above it and things like that. And I don't know if I'm going to keep the system where it is, so why don't I just put something up for temporary? So I measured the width of the little eye piece that goes, or the T piece that goes through, that holds up the ceiling. And then I created a piece using, again, that block technique, right? Put a block in there and then cut out what you don't need. And I did the same thing with a hook on the outside. It's a cylindrical shape. It's a ring shape. And I just cut away the pieces I didn't need. So now I've got a hook and I've got this other piece. And you take a very thin, right, in this case, based off of the size of the rail that it was going on, I took that and made it a hole and slid it in where I wanted it. Now I could take it up and I could slide that in, and I've got something that's holding up my wire without much trouble. I used that same technique, modified it just a little bit for a spot that I could slide in over a couple of door frames to run a wire above the door frame as opposed to underneath it. Again, these are things that I don't know if I'm going to keep, but where this is being run, I don't have an above that I can run it to. There's no drop ceiling that I could tuck this thing into. It's just straight ceiling. So it gets it up and out of the way, and it allows me to put an extension cord where I couldn't normally put an extension cord without stepping on it or possibly damaging it in some fashion. So again, something that is practical, but I couldn't go get. Now this next one's a little bit different. So I have cats, and once a week they get a special soft, moist food. And the easiest way to deal with those is to have those little metal bowls. Right? They're easy to clean. They're easy to disinfect. You just take them. You can wash them right off. However, in order for them to use those bowls, their heads are down all the way. And as we know, that's not necessarily the best position for these little guys to eat. So what I did instead was I couldn't find a way to really do or purchase something that was going to take these metal bowls up. The metal bowls are inexpensive, and everything that I could find that would hold the bowls up usually had two bowls together, which I didn't need, and they were pretty expensive. They were made out of metal and things like that, and they were not an inexpensive product. So I thought, well, what could I model? So I just took a cylindrical model in Tinkercad, again putting the hole down through the middle of it so that the sides were the width that I wanted them to be of material. Again, I think did about 5 mils. The opening on it is about 4.6 inches, because most things work in millimeters. That's just the way everything's set up by default. So I just did with millimeters, but it's about 4.6, 4.7 inches. The bowl fits in, And you can tip the bowl a little bit so it's not flat. Even though the underlying thing is flat, I did not angle this at all. And I just put a square base to it. And like I said, that hole that I made goes all the way through. So I have a very hollow object, very lightweight, that you can just put the metal bowl in. So you can go buy these bowls, and you can throw the bowls away. You throw the base away. It's all modular. It's all replaceable. And they don't take too long. They take a couple hours for them to print. But again, with a 3D print, that's not an unusual or overlong time period. I have 5 cats. I made up the 5 different configurations for the bowls, these 5 little towers. They're not up a great height, but my cats aren't that tall, and they can just eat there, and they're not eating on the floor anymore. Again, a practical thing I could not find one of that I could use. I got the same issue with the cat litter that I talked about last week. I get the cat litter in the cardboard containers. I put the cat litter into a solid plastic container, an old Tidy cat litter container, which allows me to then scoop the stuff out. I scoop it out into a container that I can carry around with me, and that full container, old Cremora container, is about what I need to top off any of the litter boxes after I've cleaned them a couple times. So this allows me to carry the thing around. I've got the 5 litter pans, or 4 litter pans that I've got to fill. But the other problem that I have is, how do you get it out of the container? All right. Getting it from the cardboard container to the plastic container is easy. You just open it up, pour it in. Getting it from the plastic container to the carrying containers, that becomes tricky. And I've got a very old butter container, a margarine container, that I scoop the stuff out with. But it's usable. All right. I like to recycle a lot of things. That's why I'm using the Cremora containers. That's why I'm using the old Tidy Cat container. It's there. It's available. It does the job that I need to do. But this other container is starting to warp, and it's not as efficient as I'd like it to be. So I'll be designing and creating a scoop that will fit within the confines of the top of the Cremora container, which what I'm using currently does not. And it will allow me to just scoop the stuff out easily and pour it in there. If I can make it deep enough, I might make it even easier to pour, but I've got to be careful because of the container it's coming out of. I've got size constraints. All right. I can't make it as big as I want or as deep as I want. I have to work within what I've got. Because this isn't anything that I can really find anywhere. The scoops that I found are either too big to work in this particular environment, like a feed scoop for a horse, for example. That would be great to be able to scoop in there and scoop that up. A couple of scoops of that, 1 1/4 scoops of that would fill up my container for me. But that's not going to fit in the containers that I've got to get the cat litter out. So I got to come up with something in between, something that I can't find. I don't want a cup container. It's too small. So that's something that can be worked on. And I'm sure you guys have got things around your house that you can kind of get something that's going to work. But if you designed it, it'd be better. And that's where you start to look at these 3D models that can be brought in to your house and utilized. And if you can't do it yourself, all right, if you can't do any part of it, there are people out there who will do the design for you. There's 3D printing shops out there that'll print it. If you can print it and you can't design it, just get somebody to design it for you. If you can design it but you can't print it, send it off to one of these labs, and the farm will print it out for you, and ship it to you. So you've got options. And again, a lot of this stuff is cheaper than what it would cost you to go buy it. In a lot of cases, not all the time. And again, if you're designing it yourself and you don't have the exact tools, model it a couple of times and look at what you've got. The nice part about having a 3D printer, even if you're not going to do the final job on it, is that allows you to do prototyping, right? You can just send it to that 3D printer, let it prototype it out, and go from there. Then if you want to have it printed elsewhere, for example, I use almost exclusively PLA. I like it. It gets the job done. However, PLA, I hear, can have problems in hot cars in the summer. Now, what part of the country that comment comes from, I don't know. I have a couple of PLA pieces for my car, so I'll see how that comes out this year. But there are other materials, and some of those materials have a toxic fume output that PLA does not have, right? I've got an open bed one, and I've got a closed bed one for PLA. I could, in the closed bed one, go get the exhaust stuff to it, get it all hooked up, take it, run it outside, and print whatever I wanted in there. Or I can prototype it in PLA, get it to what I want it to look like, and then have it shipped, send out that file to have the thing printed for me in a different material. The advantage to that is I can still do all my prototyping in PLA. I've got the stuff for it, and the stuff that I sell on Etsy is PLA. All right, so there's no reason for me to have anything else, any of the materials for any of the stuff that I'm doing, because I don't use anything other than PLA, except in these rare occasions where I might find something that I want to use. And sometimes you'll find something online that's usable and can be used for other things. For example, I found a little scraper. So if you're printing, sometimes the material which you want to stick to your print bed doesn't come up quite as easily. And there's some people online that have made these little scrapers, right? You can print the scraper and it'll help you scrape the stuff off of there. You know the other thing that works great for? Cleaning pans, right? You bake brownies or cookies or bread, and you end up with a little residual on it around the sides and things. Put a little water in there, let it sit for a minute, go around it with the scraper, and it takes it right off. And because it's plastic, you don't have an abrasive surface that you're using against anything, so it doesn't damage what you're using underneath. And you can just scrape everything off that way. So again, practical uses of these, which we'll do more as we go through the year. Again, if you been listening to me for a while, you know that I created a cover for my actuators outside for the panels, so that when the panels move, the actuators are protected. The motor is protected. It's tucked in, so it's not going to get wet. Because while the ones that I've got are a couple are rated for outside, a couple of the other ones I've got are rated for outside-ish, and that means they aren't full weather protected. So those might be ones that I have to install a quick release on, so I can pop those off and bring them in the winter. But then it should be fine the rest of the year, because A, they're going to be underneath the panels, so it's not like I have to worry about them getting rained on directly. But B, they've got covers on them, so even if the rain starts to splatter around and things, there's nothing going to get at those motors. So they'll be nice and protected. Again, not something I could find, but something I could design and build. It took about 3 copies before I had something that I was happy with. Then I spray painted them over the outside just to protect the PLA, and made it a silver color to make sure that they're reflecting the sunlight, so they're not getting heated quite as much as they would normally. Again, they're going to be underneath the solar panels, but the solar panels are going to heat, so I'm trying to take that into consideration. But that's what I got for you guys for what we're going to do this year on the 3D printing thing. We'll do a couple of odd projects here and there, I'm sure, but most of what I do is practical. So if you're interested in the practical side, this is the place to be. And I'll talk to you guys all next week.